Hi, this is Claire, and I'd like to show you how to make jump rings, which are the circular rings we use for joining in jewellery, and also we can make chains and chain mail out of those jump rings. So you can use all types of material to make jump rings, really circular objects, but these are actually manufactured jump ring makers. And these come in two sizes. So the size is simply defined by the actual diameter of the jump ring, and this one here makes large jump rings and this one makes smaller jump rings. So it's nice to make your own jump rings if you can, and I encourage people to be self-sufficient with their jewellery. So let's have a look at making a large jump ring. You need to use wire that does have some strength to it, because otherwise the jump ring will be not structurally sound when you hang things. So we're using some brass wire here, and there's a little hole just at the bottom of the jump ring here, and often the wire can fit straight into that, and that's kind of handy when it does. Now, if it doesn't fit into that particular hole, you can use other methods by bending it around the side, which would mean that you'd bend the wire behind, bend it over the bottom table, and hold it firmly with your finger when you wind the wire around the pole. So if it fits in there, that's fantastic, because it will hold nicely and firmly. So it is actually sticking through a bit at the moment, so I might just tap that so it doesn't actually stick into my finger. So now, firmly, and keeping the wire as close together as you can, you wind the wire almost like a spring, keeping each rotation close to the previous rotation. So at certain times you might like to just push those down so they are compressed. We keep them compressed so that they don't become like an ellipse, and we wind these around that central pole. And I'm holding it firmly, but it's not a difficult task to do that. And around we go. So at the very end, you could tap that with a hammer just to work harden it a little bit and help it hold into position, but I'm just going to let it go. Okay, at this point you can detach it, so you can just use something to lever it out, and you have a spring. So trim off the last little bit here, and these are actually wire cutters. They look like scissors, but they're my favourite wire cutters. Now, you could simply just cut right through that and you would get a whole lot of jump rings. You get circles which could be used to hold different types of jewellery. Now, if you cut them, they're not as good as if you saw them. So with a piercing saw, if you clamped this into a little clamp on the table, you could saw through them. Now I'm going to cut some of them so I can show you what I mean. So you just simply cut through and you get jump rings. Now this is fantastic for mass producing rings that you might like to use for hanging pendants or making different kinds of chainmail. There's another aspect, just for an added security, you can overlap that join with a piece of plain metal. So you see how that jump ring finishes here. If I allowed a bit of an overlap and cut this jump ring over here, you have that key ring effect. So that allows you a bit more security when you're working, when you're hanging pendants. You can do other things, which is one of my favourite things to do when I'm hanging, is to use my circular pliers, and you can see they're the ones with the circle, and you can actually create a little bend, a little loop, which makes it even more secure. So just to keep my metal still, I can use another pair of pliers to hold it. And on that very end there, if you can just see that, I'm going to create another secure loop. So just using the fine part of those pliers, I'm just going to create a secure loop. I'm using the table to brace my grip. So I did that fairly quickly, and you can certainly take a little bit more time to do that and pinch it very tight. And if you had a big cord or a chain, that would make it a lot more secure and less likely to come apart. So the keyring technique is a more secure method of making chains. And if you're hanging a pendant, I definitely would advise an overlapping of those rings. So that's how you make jump rings.